but we'll go ahead and get started. And if we could go to the communication slide.
All right. Well, Taptipain Oikalo, Inuinakita Himumukata, Inamanakwas Julia Keith. Good day, everyone. My name is Himumukata. It means she calls out from on high. I also go by Julia Keith. I am a member of the Nez Perce tribe and serve as project director over here at Kaufman and Associates. And I am going to walk us through some of the technical side to our Zoom meeting today. The presentation slides will appear in the main window while the speaker will appear in the top corner. At the bottom of your screen is the menu bar. Here you will find the chat, raise hand, Q&A, and closed caption functions. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing. We will respond to these concerns as they come in. Next to the chat box is the raise hand feature. You're able to use this during the Q&A comment segment of the presentation to let us know when you'd like us to unmute your mic so you can ask a question. Another way you're able to submit a question and comment is the Q&A box itself, where you can leave a question at any point during the webinar for presenters to address during the open discussion at the end. Lastly, live captioning is available for today's broadcast. Simply click the CC icon to use this feature. Please note, today's webinar is being recorded for note-taking purposes. And once again, welcome to the webinar.
All right, and I would like to invite Counselor Joe Deere. Would you be willing to do our opening in a good way? Oh, you have to raise your hand and then, there we go.
Yeah, okay, I'm here.
Awesome. Would you be willing to do our opening?
Sure, I would.
Awesome.
Okay, Creator, we come to you today to discuss with tribal leaders and our citizens of the indigenous nations to work together as we talk about having a voice in America with the upcoming votes and how important it is to represent Indian country in our lands. And we thank everybody for coming together to share information, to educate on this situation as a serious situation arises coming up. So I want to go with you today and thank you again, Creator, for everything you've done. Wado.
Wado. All right.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I would like to introduce to you our fearless leader, Mr. Larry Wright, our Executive Director for the National Congress of American Indians.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Ahom, Ponkomoshe, Wongide, Ombade, Wiki, they go, they know Hick de Wiblahan, Ponkomoshe, Alashwahon, De, Wanoche, Larry Wright Jr., Ijazik de Abdi, Wishti, Usni, Ponkabdi, Wachpadingti, Wongide, Wibli Stuba, Wibli, Juba Abdi, they gone. Adon Nyonshinga, Ishage, Waunjiga, Eri Dagdi, Daon Wagidaga, Wiblahan. Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Larry Wright Jr. I'm from the Ponca tribe in Nebraska. I served as tribal chairman for 11 years. My Ponca name is Buffalo Spirit, and I come from the Buffalo clan. It's good to have all of you join us today and take time out of your busy schedules to take part in this webinar and an issue that's important to all of us and get out the vote. I also taught high school government and civics classes, and a quote I used with my students at the time that I think still rings true today in our efforts to get out the vote is a saying that says, bad officials are elected by good people who don't vote. And that really kind of underscores the importance of what we're trying to do for Indian country and showing what a difference Indian country can make in our vote. And just want to also, as a reminder of NCAI's commitment to civic engagement and get out the vote for over a decade. And we want to continue to do that moving forward. And we want to do it in a better way and to be able to be a good partner to all the organizations, all the groups that are working so hard to make our get out the vote efforts really make a difference. And very proud of NCAI's ability to help elevate our messaging in Indian country and do everything that we can to help all of our efforts. Before we get started, I do want to recognize we have some members of our executive committee here with us today, and I'd like to, I'll call their names out, but also give them a chance to say a few words here before we get started. We have Eastern Oklahoma VP Joe Deere, Eastern Oklahoma alternate VP Brad Kilscrow, and we have our Southern Plains VP Reggie Wasana. And I'd like to turn this over to you, sir, to say a few words.
Thank you, Larry. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. This time of year, every 4 years and every 2 years, a lot of critical things happen in Indian country because a lot of the policy made by those elected officials affect us all, whether it be by land, water, those type of things that we depend upon. It's important that all the departments in the United States government is aware that the tribes go out and vote. And I will say in the 90s, I was up at Capitol Hill quite a bit. And as we spoke to a lot of the elected officials, senators and congressmen, one thing that they've always said to us, and they would take us out in the hall and say this, and they said, Indian people don't vote. They said the tribes don't vote. And I didn't really pay much attention to it because I was kind of new and didn't understand the whole process. But today, almost 30 years later, it resonates with how important it is to vote, because those bills that are passed, they take away our rights, they give us more rights, or they just kind of keep us under their thumb, so to speak. But I think it's important that today that we actually acknowledge that every vote across Indian country is a significant, important vote, because one vote at a time actually adds up. And the past election, when President Biden was elected, I think there was demonstrated a lot of positivity on tribal nations going out and voting in the Four Corners area, in around Phoenix, and those type of places that actually helped his campaign in his presidency. So I think it's very important, and people need to understand that it may just be one person, but they all add up. So I just want to say appreciate, Larry, you guys hosting this and putting on this event for Indian country, so that we can at least stress that we are here, we do vote, and that those people who take us out in the halls of Congress can now say the tribes are banding together, and we're being more of a force than we were in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Area VP Joe Deere. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Executive Director Larry. I do want to mention, I've heard the same thing over the last 30 years. Natives do not vote. We have been more productive now with people such groups as Rock the Native Vote, UINO getting out there ready to vote. And we have taught people and tried to educate people how important it is to vote, due to even recent cases at Supreme Court, in such cases as the Strobel case here, the Burkeen case, Roe v. Wade. Even though these are cases, our vote helps that. And they know, going through Indian country now, how important it is to get out to vote, to get the right people that will talk about tribal consultations, tribal sovereignty, food sovereignty, our health, our care, and our education. Because we have proven over the last 20 years, tribal nations across the United States are great partners. And sometimes we do things better than the United States government. So here in the Eastern region, there's been a late surge for voting. Like yesterday, we just had a big mayor race in Tulsa. Luckily enough, 2 out of the 3 candidates that are in the runoff have spoke about tribal concerns and how they are going to make a tribal person as a person that can relate directly to the mayor's office. So having those 2 left on the stand shows that tribes do get out. We actually had a county commissioner as a Cherokee citizen that made it to a runoff. So they got out and vote yesterday, and that number was huge. It was 15,000 for each of the 3 top mayors. And our 2 that do tribal consultations and work with tribal nations were the top 2. So this is a very important issue. I'm glad it was brought up. And if there's anything I can do to help you guys anywhere across the United States, especially here in the Eastern region, please reach out, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to call on alternate Eastern Oklahoma VP Brad Kilscrow.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, thank you for acknowledging me. Yes, this is a very important time, not only for Indian country, but for our nation in general. This is a very important election that could affect Indian country crucially, financially. We could very well see a lot of grants and just our government relations possibly just go away with this election. So it's very important that Indian country gets out. Our voices are heard at the polls this year. And I hope that, each tribal administration is doing what they can to their people to allow them to understand this is an important election. Whatever your political affiliation is, get out there and vote and make sure that your citizens know the importance of it. So thank you just for this little time. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Wanisha.
And thank you, sir. I just want to recognize the other VPs from the 3 regions, and even though they're not here, want to call their names out in case they join us late. But we have Great Plains Region Vice President Chairman Ryman LeBeau. The Great Plains alternate is Chairman Garrett Renville, and we have the Southern Plains alternate Christy Modlin. Maybe if they get a chance to join us, we'll recognize them and give them some time. But we do have 2 ex executive committee members as well. And the first one I'd like to recognize and give them a chance to speak if they would like is Nita Batiste. Would you like to say anything, ma'am?
Where am I? Can you hear me okay?
We can.
I'll tell you what, this is exciting times. And again, Anita Batiste, Vice Chair, Alabama Coshada Tribe of Texas. We have certainly had our share. It seems like it's never ending with the state of Texas, with the governor and the attorney general. But it's true. We really need to assemble together. There's 3 federally recognized tribes in Texas: Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and also the traditional Kickapoo tribe of Texas. That also includes the population of tribal nations represented in Dallas, Austin, Houston. So we're going to try to, no, we're not going to try, we're going to reach out and let's get our voices heard, because this is such a crucial time for each and every one of us as tribal people. As a matter of fact, as United States citizens, we've got to get this vote going out. And and I apologize for my tardiness. I was actually waiting on another Zoom. But again, thank you, Larry, for the opportunity to speak. I certainly appreciate each and every one of you. Alila Molo.
Thank you, ma'am. And next, I'd like to call on Margot Gray, Executive Director for UINO.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the National Congress of American Indians for the grant support, and to let you know we are putting that to work. We are holding throughout the state of Oklahoma in the next month, all the way up to October 11th. We are traveling to every tribal headquarters and having voter registration up until October 11th, the last day. And we're holding 2 events, one in Tulsa and another one in Oklahoma City. And I know that Joe had spoke about the importance of here in Tulsa. And in fact, I'm in the next office over is Monroe's headquarters. So it's been a buzz up here all day. United Nations represents the 38 federally recognized tribes here in Oklahoma. But it's really exciting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So if you drop a pin downtown Tulsa and you do a 100-mile radius, there are more Native Americans in that 100-mile radius than there is in any other US city in the country. So with that being said, that's why it's a target market for us, for United Indian Nations, to get as many people registered. And talking to Monroe earlier today, he basically said that the Native vote made a difference in his election. He came out on top of the top 3 for the mayor of Tulsa. Like was said before, he's the one who's talking about sovereignty. He understands it, and that is exactly why we want more people registered and informed. So one of the things we're doing on September 30th at River Spirit, we will have an all-day event, and we'll have tribal leaders speak. We'll have some of our tribal attorneys speak. And in the afternoon, it's Sovereignty 101. And Larry, if you are more than welcome to come and be one of our speakers, if you can make it on September 30th, we'd love to have you. And then in the afternoon is a candidates forum. And we did this 2 years ago. And we have questions that talk about, do you understand what sovereignty is? And so it's mainly targeted towards the state legislatures. And there's a lot of judges on the ticket this year and mayors. When these things come before them, do they understand what sovereignty is? So all the questions are going to be geared for that, and that gives them an opportunity to talk about the platform. And I think 2 years ago, we had close to 450 people attend that event. Not only were the candidates there, but also the community was there as well. And then in the evening, we're going to have another voter registration drive in the parking lot. And we'll have guest speakers as well, and we'll have some special guests that are attending. So we're going to do that other event in Oklahoma City where we do voter registration. And not to take away from the thunder of Lorinda Morgan, but when we later on today, we're doing a big volunteer to how many different tribal nations that we're going to be having volunteer in this event. And so we're real excited about it. I think that's longer than what you wanted me to speak, Larry, but we're really excited about this year, because we know even if we have 10 to 15 people at each precinct, that moves the needle, and that's going to be making a difference. I know in Texas, they just knocked off over 1 million people off their voter registration rolls. 1 million. We understand some people die. We understand that some people move, but they're watching what we're doing. We know that. So we want to make sure that people check to make sure that they're registered, and get the new people registered and give them a reason to go to the polls this November. Thank you.
Thank you. And as luck would have it, Margot, I'm actually scheduled to be down there during that time. So I'll follow up with more information. But thank you all for those good words, getting us started here, all important things. And so thank you for sharing. Next, I'd like to, we want to share a message from President Mark McCarroll.
Miyuyam. My name is Mark McCarroll, President of the National Congress of American Indians and Tribal Chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians. Welcome to NCAI's Get Out the Vote webinar series. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Snyder Act of 1924, which granted U.S. citizenship to America's first people. Voting is likely one of our most consequential constitutional rights. This webinar will serve as a vital tool for tribal leaders on how to mobilize our tribal citizens. The native vote can be the deciding vote this election. Be the margin of victory, honor the past, and prepare for the future. Thank you.
We thank President McCarroll for taking the time to do that for us. Next, in just kind of back up a little bit, as we move forward with our Get Out the Vote efforts, our civic engagement efforts here at NCAI, as I said earlier, we've been doing this for a long time, but we wanted to really amplify what NCAI is doing moving forward, and realizing and recognizing all the great work that people are doing throughout the country on behalf of Indian country, and knowing that it's those that are on the ground in your communities that are doing the work already. And NCAI just wants to position ourselves to be a better resource. And with that, as we move forward in this phase and the next, we've teamed up with Kaufman and Associates and the great work that they're doing to help us really kickstart this campaign. And I want to say a special thanks to all the team that's on the call here that's helped make this happen. And in the interim, person that probably needs no introduction, but on behalf of NCAI, we've enlisted Dr. Aaron Payment to be NCAI's Get Out the Vote campaign manager in working with Kaufman as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn this over to Dr. Payment.
All right, thank you, Larry. And I'm working from home and I have my child is a little needy right now, so if we might get interrupted, I apologize. So I first want to explain that we are very appreciative. Kaufman and Associates is a 100% Native woman-owned company. Our president is Joanne Kaufman, who has been engaged in this process for over 20 years. And so we're very grateful to be part of this process. Joanne's motto is that we do work that matters for Indian country. So thank you, Larry, for letting us be part of your process. Our agenda today is we're going to talk about the importance of exercising our right to vote. And we're going to prove to you that we can be the margin of victory and set the agenda going forward. And part of that agenda is the sovereignty ticket platform. And Larry will do a deep dive on what that looks like, and then he'll hand it back over to me. And I will talk about some policy issues that are very important to tribal nations. We will then speak about mobilizing your tribal citizens and getting you all excited and engaged in the process, and some tools and resources that you might find helpful. And then we will conclude with an open discussion from tribal leaders about what you're hearing on the election, what do we need to be doing, how can we be most supportive? And then we'll close with final comments. Next slide. Okay, so our project is a 1-month project, and we're almost done with it. And the work that we've done in a very short time frame is very exciting. Our purpose is to urge tribal nations and their citizens to register to vote. Also to urge Natives to vote for candidates who support the treaty and trust obligation. As you know, NCAI is a nonpartisan organization, and so we're equal opportunity for people who support us. We encourage all candidates to support Indian country. And then we want to talk briefly about and appreciate the role of campaigns and elections on establishing the agenda going forward. Our deliverables for this project are a launch video and trusted messenger videos. We just actually got to watch the launch video today, and it's very exciting. It's very energizing, and I think you're going to like it. And also the trusted messenger videos will include some legislators to encourage you to participate, but also some Indian celebrities. And so we're very excited about those as well. NCI, as Larry has mentioned, has been involved in the Native Get Out to Vote for quite a while in partnership with a number of other Native orgs and nonprofits. And so we work to refresh the Native Get Out to Vote website. We are conducting these webinars. We've had them all across the NCI regions. Today, right now is the last one that we will host. And we're sharing information that we hope that you share out back in Indian country, and training guides on how to address the media, but also how to encourage the media to pay attention, to see us as something more than something else. If you remember that quote, something else, but that we are a factor and we can be the determining factor. So hopefully we will get some press coverage during this campaign. And then disseminating our toolkits. We've refreshed the NCAI government Get Out to Vote toolkits. And then Larry will do a little bit more information about the mini grants that are available and just how easy it is to gain access to those mini grants so that NCAI can support Indian country in getting excited and participating. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of rhetorical questions. Why should American Indians vote? Does my vote really matter? Does voting diminish tribal sovereignty? If you look back to the 90s, that was kind of a thing. Some tribes were saying that it would diminish our sovereignty by participating. And then, a quote from former president of NCAI, Jefferson Keel, former lieutenant governor of Chickasaw Nation, was, should I vote D for Democrat or R for Republican? Or how about I for Indian? Is it too late to register to vote? How do I register? Where do I vote? And how about absentee voting? And where do we get this information? And we'll share some information about that. So when tribes signed treaties ceding nearly 1 billion acres of Indian land in exchange for provisions of health, education, and social welfare into perpetuity, our ancestors secured a commitment for funding federal programs and services forever. While these rights are generally upheld through judicial precedents, they depend entirely on who is in office. While American Indian and Alaska Natives were granted citizenship 100 years ago, a guaranteed right to vote didn't come until the 1964 Civil Rights Act was enacted. But still to this day, we have issues of voter suppression. You just heard about Texas. Also, we know about Arizona citizenship and requiring American Indians in Arizona to prove their citizenship, which is really ironic on the 100th anniversary of the Snyder Act. But for all of that, it is our solemn duty to vote. So we encourage everybody to please exercise your right to vote. And yes, your vote matters. President Kennedy won his election in 1961 by just over 100,000 votes, which is an average of 1 vote per precinct. The 2016 presidential election in Michigan was decided by just over 10,000 votes. The number of Native Americans in Michigan in 2020 was nearly 110,000. We can be the margin of victory. You get to help decide who is president and who controls the House and Senate. Let your vote be for candidates who support tribal sovereignty and a tribal sovereignty ticket. Voting does not diminish tribal sovereignty. Just as most Americans can vote in local, state, and federal elections, so too can Natives, but we have another level of citizenship and representation through our vote. If you vote in favor of candidates who have a platform supporting the treaty and trust obligation, you strengthen our sovereignty. If you prioritize the impact of the federal government on tribal sovereignty and federal funding, as Indians, we win. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. We encourage you, however, to research the candidates and ask the tough questions of how they will serve you as an American Indian. It's not too late to register to vote, but this varies based on jurisdiction. So we encourage you to please go to nativevote.org to learn how to register in your respective state, how to secure absentee ballots, and where to vote in person. And of course, some of you obviously already know that information, so we encourage you to grab that information and share that information with whoever will listen. So next slide. Now I want to convince you that we can be the margin of victory. The close margins in the last 2 presidential elections suggest that the lack of a native-focused campaign in 2016 and the courting the native vote in 2020 may explain how key battleground states turned from red to blue and decided the election. Data shows that the proportion of natives in multiples greater than the win or loss margin. Michigan was won in 2016 by less than 0.2%, while the proportion of voters who are native is 2.3%. Michigan was won in 2020 by 2.8%, so in large part due to the American Indian vote. In Arizona in 2016, the margin of victory was just over 4%, and the proportion of natives is nearly 16%. In 2020, Arizona was won by 0.3%. We are definitely a factor. So if you look at this slide, the same battleground states are in play, and the margins right now in the polls are very close. And the proportion of American Indians as total voters in each of those states is multiples greater than the margin of error in the polls right now. So we absolutely can determine the outcome in Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, and also Colorado. And so we are likely going to be the margin of victory. Of course, we want to get candidates to understand that, and that's why we're doing this. And of course, we also want them to campaign on a platform that's a sovereignty ticket platform, so that once they campaign on it, there's a chance that they might have fidelity to their campaign when they're in office, and they actually follow through and support sovereignty ticket. And so with that, I want to hand it back over to Larry to describe what a sovereignty ticket is, at least some parts of what that might look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. And as many of you know, NCAI is a nonpartisan organization. It's part of our governing documents, and really the purpose for us to call this a sovereignty ticket platform is understanding the importance that we all have, regardless of party. Whoever Native people vote for, we want them to support candidates that support us, and make sure that those candidates not only understand, but also uphold the trust and treaty responsibility that the government has. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to help elevate that. And one of the things that we are working on here at NCAI in conjunction with our sister organizations that work and do daily work on behalf of Indian country is to create a priority policy booklet that can be shared with candidates and it can be used by people that are on the ground asking those questions, making sure that the potential candidates understand the issues that are important to Indian country. This should be done, we're hopeful, by the middle of next week, and that will again be put on the nativevote.org website. And we're going to continue to push that here today and make sure that people really use that as a resource and understand the opportunities that are there. But as many people know, the relationship between the federal government and tribal nations has been reaffirmed through Supreme Court judicial precedents, legislation, and as well as administratively through executive orders, presidential memoranda, and proclamations. But to fully honor the treaty and trust obligation in exchange for the nearly 1 billion acres of ceded Indian lands, funds appropriated by Congress in fulfillment of this great promise should be no less than advanced appropriations, mandatory rather than discretionary funding, and not subject to sequestration restrictions that are imposed by OMB budget ceilings. Indian country funding should not be affected by federal funding uncertainties during budget negotiations or continuing resolutions. And that's especially important as we face another potential continuing resolution as they need to approve that moving forward at the end of September. But achieving the classification as mandatory funding can be a difficult challenge. However, in December 2022, Congress voted on advanced appropriations for Indian Health Service funding. And we know that, to give an example, just to get that passed, it took 13 years of advocacy from Indian country to get them to do that. But moving Indian country from discretionary to mandatory and forward funded will truly honor the treaty and trust obligations this country has to us. NCAI has long collaborated with tribal nations to enumerate tribal infrastructure needs and priorities. In 2017, NCAI testified that the backlog was in excess of $47.8 billion, with the breakdown as follows: $10.3 billion for IHS facilities, $12.5 billion for IHS sanitation, $1.3 billion for BIE schools, $33 billion for Indian housing, and $20 million for multi-justice centers. And while the 2021 Jobs and Infrastructure Act afforded record amounts of funding to tribes, the vast majority of our infrastructure needs remain. When we talk about land into trust issues, we must have a clean carcieri fix. This is needed now. As late as 2018, proposed rulemaking would have granted a level of assent to local government to deprioritize tribal land into trust requests. But notwithstanding intertribal conflicts with land and trust issues, a streamlined and pragmatic process subject to less political ebbs and flows is truly needed. When we talk about sovereignty issues, NCAI's long partnership with NARF and the creation of the Supreme Court project looks at those Supreme Court cases that affect Indian country. And while the decisive outcome in Brackeen versus Holland upheld ICWA, threats of sovereignty and jurisdiction remain. NCAI has long partnered with NARF to watchdog court proceedings for possible erosion in jurisdiction and sovereignty. The McGirt decision suggests a positive turn in honoring Indian country jurisdiction. However, the impacts of the Oliphant versus Suquamish case remain where tribes lost authority to hold non-Indians accountable for certain crimes on tribal lands. The enactment of laws to stabilize jurisdiction are needed to protect tribal sovereignty and ensure that there are no holes in our jurisdiction. These agenda items and more establish a tribal sovereignty ticket to look for when casting your vote. Next up, Dr. Payment will share a few federal Indian policy issues of importance to tribal voters. Dr. Payment?
All right, and there's lots of federal policy issues. We're not going to cover them all, but we do want to hit some really important ones and tie in the boarding school reports and looking for solutions. So according to the 2018 U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, American Indian and Alaska Natives are more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, experience rape or abuse, be killed by police, have an infant mortality rate of 1.6 times that of non-Hispanic whites, have the lowest high school and college graduation rates, have the highest rates of drug and alcohol addiction, and the highest rates of suicide among adolescents. Also, according to the CDC, American Indian and Alaska Natives have the highest rates of heroin and opiate-related deaths. And then very tragically, in 2002, the CDC reported a drastic drop in life expectancy by 7 years for American Indian and Alaska Natives, bringing it back 80 years. An investigative report launched by Secretary Holland and overseen by and authored by Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Ryan Newland, shine new light on the responsibility of the federal government instigating generations of historical and intergenerational trauma that explains the worst of the worst outcomes. Volume 2 of the Newland report enumerates the cost of forced assimilation and a $23.3 billion in present value. Dollar per dollar, these expenses owed to tribal nations to return that which was taken to heal and confront the systemic impacts and outcomes of federal Indian policy. Returning native languages and cultural ID will be a necessary step towards healing the impact of historical and intergenerational trauma. I heard recently from a tribal leader that the expectation is dollar per dollar, what it took to steal our language should be reinvested to bring our language back. The ACA, let's talk now about the ACA and the treaty obligation. So the 2020 election cycle saw a commitment to expanding the ACA to states which did not accept Medicaid expansion. Since this time, American Indian and Alaska Natives residing in those states were permitted to sign up, but a means test is still used. Fully honoring the treaty and trust obligation for health suggests qualifying American Indians and Alaska Natives for the ACA Medicaid expansion without regard to income and creating an IHS portability similar to the VA healthcare portability. This effort stands to significantly increase third-party revenues to tribal health, closing the gap between the current $9 billion budgeted for IHS to the $50 billion that the IHS budget formulation work group has estimated that our need is. So that's 5 times what it currently is, and the third-party revenue that could be generated from IHS portability could help to close that gap. So let's talk about government-to-government relations. For those who've been around a while, in 2000, President Clinton signed Executive Order 13175, calling for government-to-government relations and true consultation. In 2019, the Government Accounting Office reported and identified a significant proportion of federal agencies have still not established consultation protocols with tribal nations. A presidential memo in 2021 directed all federal agencies to establish consultation policies within 90 days. And I joke about this, but be careful what you ask for, because I was chairperson at the time, and I remember doing 65 consultations within those 90 days. But executive orders and presidential memos are only as good as whoever sits in the Oval Office. Congressman Grijalva's RESPECT Act is appreciated, but the draft included some concerns expressed by tribes. Any draft bill to promulgate consultation should follow consultation with tribes first, but a draft legislation to codify government-to-government relations and consultation should include tribal input and should proceed. So let's talk about environmental justice and climate resilience. We're feeling the effect of it. Just the other day, it was in the 90s in my community, which is about 10 degrees hotter than it should be. Ebbs and flows of who is president should not adversely impact climate resilience. Tribal nations are the first stewards of the land and natural resources. Climate change is real and should not be subjected to political ideological shifts. Vast amounts of Jobs and Infrastructure Act funds to confront environmental justice and climate resilience, including potable water and clean energy expansion, should be extended and shielded from recessionary efforts. Further, the backlog of Indian country infrastructure needs should be addressed with an energy independence focus. So we ask everybody to emphasize these policy issues, a sovereignty ticket, and to push these and look for candidates who support tribes on these important issues. Next slide, please. So now we want to get you all excited and mobilize your tribal nation and citizens, and also your team members. You know, we are generally the largest employers wherever we're located, so we have a reach sometimes that I think tribes don't realize our reach between our citizens, our patrons, and our team members. So we're trying to get you excited about visiting our website, nativevote.org. We have lots of resources available. We have toolkits for Get Out to Vote. We will post a media guide on how to engage the media. As I said earlier, we were once relegated to something else by the media, but we want them to realize that we are a factor and we will be the determinant on who becomes president in the next election cycle. And as such, we want to push our sovereignty ticket platform so candidates pay attention and they consider advocating for our issues. And then hopefully if they do that and they give fidelity to their campaign promises, they follow through and help shape the agenda that is welcoming to Indian country. And so we encourage you again to go to our website. We have toolkits there. There are this design for School Vote Den is one of those resources you can get access to. It's shareware. And Larry will talk about a mini grant process to make available. It's one thing to try and encourage you and get you excited to participate, but it's another to put our money where our mouth is and to give you the resources that so that you can follow through. Larry.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Payment. Yeah, and our ability to provide mini grants has actually gotten stronger. As many of you know, that when we announced the creation of the NCAI Foundation at last year's annual conference, it really was designed to look at new revenue sources for not only NCAI, but by extension, all of Indian country, and specifically for our conversation today, for civic engagement and Get Out to Vote. And we're very excited about the length and the ability of the foundation to show how much it's grown in even less than a year. And to that end, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to help support, and especially financially, because we don't want to replicate or get in anybody's way or try to be competition with Indian country. We truly want to support that. And this really took on the vehicle that made the most sense for NCAI. But in doing so, when we looked at what other possible funding is out there, we started looking at the philanthropic sector. But as for an example, in this country alone, over $400 billion went to different organizations from the philanthropic sector, and less than 0.5% of that money went to Indian country. And as we built our foundation up and it started having those conversations and asking these different foundations that were providing these funds, you know, what's their plan for Indian country? Almost all of them said, we don't have one and we don't know where to start. And that really kind of solidified our decision to go with this process and understand that as NCAI has for 80 years of representing Indian country, we wanted to make sure that we use that strength and that voice of NCAI to help facilitate this. And so by extension, we've been able to do smaller grants in the past, but we really wanted to create a revenue flow that we could count on and show those funders how much this is needed. And it's specifically those funders that want to fund civic engagement activities. And so while we look at, when you go to the nativevote.org website, we have a tab specifically for grants. And we really want to push everybody on this call to look at that. I know Margot may talk a little bit about the benefit that it's had for her organization, but we want to show those funders what the true need is. And we're doing, our team is doing a great job. We just recently got a $500,000 grant, and we have proposals out for several million more. And so we're waiting answers on those, and some of those have been approved. They just haven't come in yet. But we want to turn that around as much as we possibly can to get it to Indian country. But when you look at what these mini grants are and who can apply, obviously it's tribal governments, it's native-led 501c3s and C4s, and native vote collectives. And so we want to do as much as we can to get the money to the groups that are doing the work. And when we talk about what kind of projects are eligible, and you'll see this on the site, is we want to increase civic participation, enhance capacity of tribal organizations, comprehensive data and analysis tool development, youth and elder engagement programs, strategic coalition building and collaboration, communication and outreach efforts, and increased awareness and understanding of Native voting rights. And so please look at that. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our team. They'll follow up with that information. We're trying to keep this give it as much latitude as we possibly can, because we want to get the money where it's needed. But there are some parameters to that, and we'll continue to update information on that. But again, the other pieces to this is, and just kind of give a quick overview. Really, when you submit, you'll talk about what you're trying to do. If you wanted to get T-shirts out or have the toolkits downloaded and printed, the handout, that would all be part of that grant process, and we want you to be able to do that locally, so that there's no holdup in waiting on NCAI. For instance, we're in the policy business. We're not in the T-shirt business, and so you have local vendors that you can that you deal with regularly. We want to be able to provide the logos that you can use, the information that can be downloaded, and all the resources. And as I said earlier, this is going to be a dynamic website. There's going to be continuing additions to it, information, and we're excited about that as we continue to grow this out. And when we talk about voter suppression, as we said earlier, NARF is a key component and partner in this project. And there's information in the toolkits on what to do if you do experience that. And so everybody's working together on this, moving in the same direction. But we want to continue to strengthen our partnership with all of you from NCAI, and that's our commitment to you moving forward, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help Indian country understand the importance of voting. And we've all heard this too. We know that some in Indian country feel that elections are designed to keep us out or minimize us or disenfranchise us. But at the same time, you've also heard the saying, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. And it's very important for us to be engaged in this process, because we can make a difference. We can push this sovereignty ticket and show the importance of that. We already have that already. We look at the members of Congress that are Native, higher number than ever before, and on both sides of the aisle. And in Oklahoma, the highest ranking that chairs one of the most important committee in Congress, the Appropriation Committee, is Republican Tom Cole. And so we need that help on both sides of the aisle. And the sovereignty ticket, we feel, is the best way for us to help our undecided voters in Indian country on how to help them decide who they want to vote for. So with that, I'll stop, turn it back over to you, Dr. Payment.
All right, I did post a couple of ideas in the chat, but we do want to go to the next slide, and we want to open for discussion. We've got a couple of prompt questions. What are your general feelings about the election? Is your community engaged? We're talking about your citizens, your team members, your patrons, community members. What efforts are happening in your region? Next slide. And just a couple other prompts is, what messages resonate with your people? What would you like to see in a National Native GOTV campaign? What can we do to help? And then what resources do you need to help push a Native Get Out to Vote effort? So all you got to do is raise your hand and we will unmute you. We want to have a lively discussion. Again, what are you hearing? What resources do you need, and how can we help? All right, let's see. Councilman Watsana. If I said your name right, I apologize. Let's see. I think asked to unmute.
You're on mute, sir.
Okay, sorry. We've been pretty active. We've been working with Margot as well, and Some of the things we did, I'll read them. And Lorinda Morgan, our government affairs coordinator, director, has actually done a lot of the work herself, and she's recruited volunteers. And here's some of the things that we've done up to this point. But we've always tried to keep a voters registration going actively. So we've year round we've done the voters registration. UNIO, Warrior Up to Vote, the state co-chairs Pam Shaw and Lorinda Morgan are those co-chairs for that. The Oklahoma Indian Bar Association Voters Campaign, the organizer there is Arvo Mikkonen, so we've been in contact with those people as well. We had Rock the Vote Oklahoma, and the organizer there was Jenny Underwood. But we've been going out pretty strong since 2018. We've had voters registration initiatives that are organized by, of course, Lorinda and the Government Affairs Office. We've had voters registration booths that are set up at tribal program events, powwows, concerts that we have here at the tribe and at our tribal offices. Tribal programs and the Lucky Star Casino, our casino employees volunteer to get out and help the voters registration. The month of July, they registered 71 voters there at the Lucky Star Casino and at the Oklahoma Indian Nations powwow that we have here locally. Some of the upcoming events include the participation in National Voters Registration Day on September the 17th, where voters registration will be set up throughout the 11 counties that we service in Northwest Oklahoma to register to vote. The voters registration booths will be set up at various events on October the 9th. Voters registration deadline in Oklahoma. Cheyenne Rappel Tribes plan to have its first ever election night watch party on election night in November. Of course, the Warrior Up to Vote has always been recruiting volunteers. So the WTV is hosting a candidate forum September 30th in Tulsa, and we'll be starting a voters registration RV tour, which I'm sure Margot can talk to you more about that. But there will be having a red, white, and blues voter registration event at Wheeler Park Ferris Wheel in Oklahoma City on September the 17th, and the American Indian Bar Association will be participating. And I think we've tried to hit our county election boards as well to try to get information on deadlines, how to submit voters registration applications and submissions. So we've been trying to be real active. We've been doing everything we can to get people out to vote. Like I said, it's pretty vital. It's important. I believe a lot of our funding, our grants, our laws, all those things are definitely tied to our rights to vote. So I think people need to get out there and take it serious and head to the polls, because even in some of the small communities, whether it's the school boards or mayors or any of those, sometimes if you look at those numbers, there might be 100 people, less than 100 people who vote. And I sometimes know we have more tribal members in some of those communities that could change those outcomes of those votes. So we really got to be progressive. And I know sometimes it's hard because tribal members say they don't have rides or the time, and maybe we need to focus on some kind of ride share program where they can get to the polls. Because if you look at the margin where they actually win, you may be looking at 6 to 10 to 12 votes. And we know we could have flipped some of them races, but I think the tribal members, Indian people throughout Indian country need to express their right and go vote, because it's going to be pretty critical this election season. And I just believe that everybody just needs to get out, and that's all that we can say and hope for. But we are putting it out there. We are going to powwows. We are giving drinks, soft drinks, and water, candy, little gifts, and things like that. So people will recognize that the vitality of getting out to vote. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. But that's kind of what we've been doing. But Lorinda Morgan has been kind of spearheading that for us. So we appreciate all her hard work and her dedication and late hours that she spends doing it. So just thank you to everyone and to Lorinda.
Awesome. Others got their hand raised. only we could figure out how to make fry bread more portable. We could give away fry bread.
Hey, this is Joe Deere, Cherokee Nation, Eastern Region here in Oklahoma. I just want to add, we do the same thing on this side of the northeastern part of the state, work with UINO, rock the native vote, but we also now within Cherokee Nation have starting added a small educational piece for tribal members. And what that educational piece, it's very short because a lot of understanding is that a lot of tribal citizens said, oh, they're registered to vote, but they're only registered to vote in the United States government. And some assume they can vote in tribal elections well. So the education piece is yes, vote in the United States government, but also you need to register in both sides to get your vote heard. So that educational piece we've added at our events. In our events in this area, we have them show up, whether they're a native event or a non-native event. We've even had them show up at galas because we know people will be there and those natives will vote. And I think that's what's happened in the city of Tulsa race with a native. There was a lot of new natives that voted in this election. So we are flipping those. We have flipped some seats on the House of Representatives and State Senate side as well. So I just want to say, when you go out for the vote, make sure they're trained to give an educational piece about absentees if they're not available to go, to request that in a timely manner and educate them that they're not both registered. If they're only registered in the United States government, make sure they're registered with tribal politics as well. So let them know how important this is, that their voice counts for Native country. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Margot. You have to unmute. There you go.
Well, like tonight, I just put your, well, maybe about 10-15 minutes ago, your website up on our Facebook page. So it's already got some, I was looking at the analytics. People are watching what we're doing, whether it's NCAI, Rock the Native Vote, United, well, our organization, Warrior Up to Vote, which is a part of United Indian Nations of Oklahoma. And so we're having a volunteer recruitment tonight at 7 o'clock, a webinar, not a webinar, a Zoom meeting. And of course, we got the fabulous Lorinda Morgan, who's going to be handling that for us. The other thing is, I addressed the Oklahoma Indian Tax Association. So this may be where we reach out to our sister organizations within each of your state. So they have graciously said, because we've got like a QR code that we've had done, and then it'll take you to Turbo Vote or any of those online votes that you can sign up and register, or whether if you don't have access to paper. So if you're going to go to get your tribal tag, they said that they will ask, hey, have you registered to vote? So there's just so many different ways. So I've also talked to our clinics. Can we put this up there? It's nonpartisan. It's just that if you're receiving services, you should vote, because whether it's a tribal election or obviously this national election, so we've been reaching them. So we're having posters made with the QR code. We're sending those out to all the tribal taxation offices across Oklahoma. And then we're also sending them to our healthcare centers. It's up to them if they want to put them up, but we're making it available. And when I talked to all the tax administrators in the state of Oklahoma, and they said, absolutely, we'll get our people just trained and teach people just to, use their phones and then we could also link them to you all as well. Let me think how to do that. I'll talk to our IT person, and that way they can go to nativevote.org as well. I think that we're always trying to go to the people to do that, but every day we have people going into our clinics. People are going, the busiest offices up there are well, for us in Oklahoma, because we all sell tribal tags, I think almost all of us do, that are going to your medical appointments. And I think that a lot of people are finding out that they haven't voted in so long, they're not even on they're not even on the voter registration anymore. So, and plus Oklahoma did some gerrymandering not too long ago. And if you haven't been to your polling place, you may find out you're not to vote there. You have to go somewhere else. So it's just to be prepared and how to vote, and hopefully that we can get a succinct message out of why we vote. And I think, Larry, you did a great job of saying, sovereignty's on this ticket, or, however you put that earlier. Because I think I have to totally agree with you that's what we're voting for, because we know it makes a difference. And here in Oklahoma, like we've got Tom Cole, and we've got Mark Wayne Mullen. And we always have to go in and still talk to them. One of the two, I won't say which two, but we have to go in and always explain this is why, for some of the reasons we need stuff here in Oklahoma. But they're really voting and have an influence over, the other Senate and House of Representatives as well. So just wanted to say that, share that with you, that we're looking at other ways of getting registration. And I think we've missed it with our clinics and our tribal tags, our tribal locations, when people go in there.
Sorry, one thing that we could potentially do is we have time, is we could potentially create an attractive poster that could be sent out to the tribal offices and encourage them to put those posters up. So we're asking tribes to give us mini grants so that it can customize the message that's specific to the tribe. But one thing that we could do is we could do a push out, and if we could figure out an attractive sort of design. I love this Go Vote Den. One thing that we did here in the Southwest is, so some of you that are my generation or older might think about this, but snag the vote. We saw a slogan that's snag the vote, that obviously would have an attraction to potentially to some young people, but the mini grants can cater the message to what the respective tribes want. But maybe we should think about pushing out a poster that could be put up in tribal offices and just kind of emphasize very succinctly why it's important and what a sovereignty ticket looks like. And that could be the impetus, because you're right. If we go to our tribal health clinics, that's kind of like a hub, that or our direct services office too. So do we have any other comments? Because we are over time and we don't want to keep people. We know you got to get back to running your tribal nations. But any other final things that anybody wants to share? Okay, with that, I'll hand it back over to our illustrious executive director, and he'll close us out.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Payment. Just want to say thank you again to everybody being on this call at the end of the day, and talking about this subject really shows your commitment to what you're doing. And with reciprocity, I want to make sure that everybody knows that NCAI is here to support the best way that we can. Again, this isn't the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning. We want to continue to hear from you and how we can better support and be the partner that we need to be. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you think of questions or comments after this is over. We stand ready to do everything that we can to help Indian country make a difference in this election. And we're excited about where we're at right now and where we're going. So, and it will only get better as we have input from all of you. So thank you again for taking this time. I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Gatego Wiblahan, Shano. Thank you.
Thank you.